This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We both lost babies to SIDS in winter 2021.
In the throes of grief, I reached out to a stranger on the internet and our friendship was born.
In the years since, we've been working hard to survive, rebuild, and navigate the continual challenges that have come our way, including divorce,
Job loss,
dating while bereaved,
moving multiple times,
health scares,
pregnancy and parenting a living child,
starting new jobs, and so much more.
We are tired.
Happily ever after is out of the question for us, but this podcast documents our journeys to happier ever after because we believe life after loss is worth living.
So join us as we laugh, cry until we laugh.
Welcome to As Long As I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here.
This is my first time on this side because Alina always does all of this. So let's get started.
Great.
I'm Judith, Aiden's mom, and we have a special guest, Jen. Jen, are you anyone's mom?
I'm only a dog mom.
Jen's a dog mom. And a live dog mom.
And a dead dog mom. That feels inappropriate. It's not the same. Obviously, everyone I acknowledge it is not the same.
But today we are having just me and Jen because Alina's in the hospital having a baby. And she didn't think she was going to come because we're doing it this late into her pregnancy. But I guess it just makes it all the more special that she's having a baby right now.
Yeah.
Her husband is supposed to send me updates every 30 minutes. He was slacking earlier, but then I called and yelled, and now I'm getting kind of good updates.
What's his name?
Tyler,
come on.
Tyler texted me and he's like, there's a balloon in her cervix. So I was like, okay, we're making progress.
Okay.
So anyway, they're doing that. And Jen and I are here to talk about boundaries. But before we get there, Jen, why don't you introduce yourself, what you do, and just kind of give us some context as to your role in healing work.
Oh, great question. Great phrasing. Yes, I'm a healer. Not really. My name is Jen Ventling. I am a certified professional coach, and I work with people on their chaos. And typically that means neurodivergence, ADHD, autism. But chaos, as you know, can also come from many different places, and it can come from grief because grief can create many overlapping symptoms between ADHD and trauma, which is like brain fog and an inability to focus and trouble concentrating and difficulty with organization, difficulty with paying attention, difficulty functioning even at a basic function. And so that's kind of like, that's my sweet spot, is like helping people when they're really struggling to just get past their blocks. So I help with the block removal.
When you say blocks, so I think blocks is like a coaching term. Can you say what blocks means in
Yes,
English?
It's totally a coaching term.
Yeah.
It's like barriers. It's like you have goals and there are opportunities for all of us in our lives. And the blocks are the barriers that keep us from seeing opportunities or keep us from working towards our goals or even just keep us from functioning.
So, okay. But if you're, two questions. First, if you lost someone, would you say losing a baby is a block? Like in the context of loss, where would a block come in?
I would not call having a loss a block. I would call feelings around that block feelings around that loss. Those are your blocks. So grief.
So give me an example.
Right. So if you've had a major loss, it's not the grief and the feelings that you're experiencing. Like the healthy process of grieving is very important. It's the side effects of grief that can block you. So if it creates depression, it creates executive dysfunction, and you're unable to get out of bed, that's the block.
I also want to add that one thing I've seen, and I'm wondering if this is the case, is that sometimes people have these coping mechanisms. Like you spoke about getting out of bed. I don't know if that's really a coping mechanism. Maybe it is, but sometimes people lean to alcohol. Sometimes people lean to drugs. And then maybe the side effects of being an alcoholic could be a block,
Yes.
Or some people lean into drug use. And then it's not that the drug use is the block, just the side effects of being reliant on something in that dependent way could be a block.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would say that like blocks mostly come from our perception, because our perception is our reality. So if I believe I'll never be happy again because I've had this loss and this loss has crippled me completely, and I can't imagine recovering any sense of hope or happiness or optimism, that's a block.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to overcome depression and overcome dysfunction when you feel like nothing's ever going to get better or that you'll never be happy again.
Mm-hmm.
So that assumption or that belief, that feeling of despair, that's the block, especially related to grief.
And how would you say your work is different than therapy, group therapy, and individual therapy? Because a lot of people are in those spaces.
Yes, I love this question. So the classic definition is therapy takes a person from dysfunctional to functional, and coaching takes a functional person to optimal.
Mm.
That's the classic definition. That's what any coach or therapist will tell you, or what the internet will tell you. I find on a more personal level that therapy is really great for healing. It's really great for unpacking past trauma and talking about the brain science behind it, really kind of like marinating in it, working through it. Talk therapy can be very helpful. There's certain types of therapy like DBT, CBT, EMDR that can be very helpful. That is not part of coaching. You have to have your therapy credentials in order to do those things. Coaching is more action-based, and we can still talk about your trauma. We can still talk about your hurts. We can still talk about your experiences. And instead of working on healing those through chatting, we're going to talk about how are your feelings around those things blocking you? What barriers is that creating in your life that's keeping you stuck, that's keeping you from going forward, that's keeping you from meeting your goals? And so in that way, coaching becomes more active, and you're kind of like setting goals and then taking actions to meet those goals. Even if your goal is simply, I want to get out of bed every day.
And where can people find you before we get lost and I don't want to forget? Where can people find you?
Yeah.
How can they contact you? Do you have like a social media or email? Like,
I do.
Tell people about you.
You can find me at jenthechaotic.com. And that is also my handle on Instagram and Facebook. And you can also email me at jen.ventling@gmail.com. So
say that again.
Yeah.
And explain your last name, because I don't
listen. It's weird.
Vente, but with a ling. A vente bling.
Okay. Everyone always thinks it's Bentley, like the car.
Oh.
But it's
yes.
V as in Victor, or as my grandmother would say when she was mad, vomit. ENTLING. So I explain it as, think of a duckling, like a baby duck.
Yes.
Except it's a baby vent. A ventling.
Jen.ventling
@gmail.com.
Okay, jen.ventling@gmail.com. I wish Alina was here. That's hysterical.
We'll tell her about it later.
She'll listen. I know she'll listen. So we're here to actually talk about something. Like, thank you for all that context. People can understand a little bit about your work, a little bit about coaching. We're here to talk about boundaries. Like,
yes.
I spoke with Jen originally. I was like, what do you want to talk about? And she gave me like a billion ideas.
I want to talk about all of them. Like,
you can talk about whatever you want.
No, we're doing boundaries.
We're going to talk about whatever you want. But for today, we're talking about boundaries. And the reason why I think boundaries are so important is because the first time I ever had to enforce a boundary was after Aiden died. And the first time I ever thought about my boundaries actively was when Aiden died, when I just couldn't, when everything was too much and when I was so raw and I felt like I was walking around with no skin because everything was so painful. And my needs were like screaming from the rooftop. And I was like, okay, now I need a boundary. Until that point, I had never really, I'm sure maybe at some point it innately kicked in, but it was never an active choice. It was never like a thoughtful action. So why don't you kind of like, where do you want to pick up? You want to tell me like your thoughts on boundaries, how you would define boundaries, how you see boundaries in loss and grief?
I think it's a good place to start to just explain what boundaries are, because it's more of a buzzword now. We're hearing people talk about it. We're normalizing setting boundaries. It's a very healthy thing. And so it's important to define, what are boundaries? What are they for? So a boundary is really, it's like a limit or a guideline or a rule that you're setting up to protect yourself. And the most important thing we have to remember about boundaries is only we can hold them. So you can't set a boundary about someone else's behavior and then give them a consequence for that boundary that they have to follow. You can only hold a boundary yourself and can control yourself. So
I'm trying to process.
I know.
Can you give me an example?
Yes, I would love to. So I have a client who was dealing with some abusive behavior in her past from a coworker. And so I was talking to her about, okay, set a boundary with that coworker that if they speak to you in that way again, you will not continue the conversation. You will leave the area, you will leave the office, you will exclude yourself. And she was kind of like, well, I would rather that like this person be the one to leave. Like if they speak to me in a way that I don't like and I've set this boundary, can't they be the one to leave? And I said, yes, of course, but you can't control them. So if you're setting up a boundary with another person, it's much more effective if you make the consequences or the kind of natural progression. If your boundary is crossed, you can only control yourself. And you have to remember that when you're setting boundaries effectively. So if you're pregnant and your boundary is don't touch my belly, how do you control that? And how do you have a natural consequence if someone breaks that boundary? And you have to figure out, okay, I can only control myself, and it's not suggestible to punch someone in the face. So, do you leave the situation? Do you shout no? That's an example of how you set a boundary for yourself, knowing that you can't control someone else.
Okay, so one of the challenges that I think comes up for people who've experienced a traumatic loss is that other people are going about their daily lives and they're like doing very normal things. So sometimes someone's doing something inappropriate. For example, touching your belly. That would be inappropriate. But then some people are just like living their lives. They're inviting you to their baby shower. They are having babies. Like they're getting pregnant. They are sending you pictures of their kids. Okay, like all these things happen to me. So I know they happen to other people too. So, but those things hurt in a new way that they didn't before.
Right.
So the boundary has changed.
Yes.
So how do you identify, number one, like, okay, now is time to put up a boundary. Now is a time where I need to like work on myself and find a way to cope with this without saying anything or doing anything or drawing a boundary. Like at what point do you say, okay, this is a good time to do this? Or at what point do you say like, okay, today's a hard feeling. I'm just going to go through, let's see what tomorrow brings.
I love this question. And it's kind of a twofold question with kind of a twofold answer, because partially a boundary that we can set with ourselves is giving ourselves permission to feel how we need to feel without guilt and without shame, because your feelings are valid. And even if someone else has had an important loss in their lives or lost a baby, they still cannot understand you or how you're feeling. They can relate, but they can't understand your experience because they're not you. And so first and foremost, if you're receiving pictures of other people's kids or receiving baby shower invitations, you're allowed to feel upset or feel sad or feel angry or feel whatever you need to feel without shaming yourself or feeling guilty. And so that's a good boundary just to set for yourself of like, hey, I'm setting a boundary here that I'm not going to guilt myself if I have difficult feelings coming up around these things. The next part is, do I want to set a boundary here to protect myself from this pain point? Or do I want to work on this pain point and grow so that I can cope with it as I go through life? And I think that depends on the person and where they are in their journey with grief. Because as you know, grief, it ebbs and flows. It comes up out of nowhere, even years later. Sometimes we think we're in a good place balanced with our grief. And then all of a sudden, a strong tsunami wave of grief will just like smack us in the face. And then we're debilitated for a few days or however long. And so you have to listen to yourself, trust your gut, trust your own emotions, and know in the moment, like, is this a time to protect myself or is this a time to work on healing? And it just depends on what your capacity is. So the first thing to do when you want to set a boundary is identify your pain point. Is this hurtful to me? Is it hurting my mental health? Is it hurting my self-esteem? Is it taking my resources? Is it taking my energy? And if it's damaging you in a point where your mental health has become, like you're in a danger zone, then that's a great time to set a boundary. And know that your boundary can change. You're allowed to change your mind. Your boundaries are going to evolve over time.
Is it like, to me, what it sounds like you're describing is like a rule for myself?
Yes, that's what a boundary is.
Okay.
And
setting rules.
It's a set of rules to guide and protect yourself and help others protect you and protect themselves, because healthy boundaries are part of every relationship, whether it's friends, coworkers, romantic relationships, family, friend, like everybody can benefit from healthy boundaries. And it goes both ways of respecting each other's boundaries, asking what each other's boundaries are, and everyone kind of having that open mind and open heart to, receive someone else's boundaries and learn how to respect that.
Okay, so you have a friend who's sending you texts of her baby or inviting you, like she's pregnant. This is the worst. You had a loss, and now your friend is pregnant, and she can, even though she knows you have a loss, she continues to tell you and update you about her pregnancy, send you pictures of her newborn, and it hurts. It hurts every single time. It doesn't just hurt this one time. It hurts every single time, and it's ongoing and it's frequent. So you're like, okay, I think it's time for me to set a boundary.
Yes. Are you asking? Okay, so are you asking how to set that boundary?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very valid example for a great reason to set a boundary. And the way to do that is examine the pain point. Is it the pictures? Is it the text? Is it the frequency of the texts? Do you want a little bit of information, but you need it to be reduced? Do you want no information at all? Like, you want to know that your friend is okay, and you want your friend to know you love and support them. But at this time right now in your life, you cannot be inundated with baby information. So step one, identify your pain points and figure out what that boundary needs to look like in order to protect you. Step two, give yourself permission to not feel guilty about it. That's one of the biggest barriers that we have when it's time to set a boundary, is that even though the person is making us uncomfortable, we don't want to make them uncomfortable. It's a weird dynamic that people have, where even if somebody is just like being rude to us or being mean to us or just being, completely lacking self-awareness, and we are uncomfortable and we're being made to feel uncomfortable, or maybe it's hurting our feelings, we're very hesitant to say something because we don't want that person to then have their feelings hurt or feel uncomfortable, because we're all just very uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. So second step to a boundary is giving yourself permission to make that person feel uncomfortable. They're allowed to feel uncomfortable. They're allowed to feel awkward. They're allowed to sit with their own feelings, realizing, oh, I hurt my friend, or I made my friend feel upset. It's okay. That's part of grieving. That's part of friendship. That's part of life. And so step three would be kindly and clearly communicating that boundary. A lot of times I call it pulling your punches when you're communicating in an overly gentle way, because, we get so afraid to hurt someone's feelings or to create a conflict. So we pull that punch. And when you want to say, hey, I love you so much. I know you want to share with me. I know you're excited. I'm excited for you. And right now, I need you to not send me a single baby update. I will let you know when I can handle baby updates. For right now, I cannot handle any baby updates. So please don't talk to me about your baby. We might pull that punch and say like, hey, just sometimes it's really hard for me to hear about babies. It's not clear. It's not concise. And so if that person receives an unclear message, they might make assumptions that like, oh, well, it's hard for her, but she just needs me to be like cuter about it or funny about it or ask how she's doing more often. It leaves too much gray space for that person to misinterpret what you're actually saying. So the more clear you can be when you set a boundary, the more effective it's going to be. And it also...
I feel like grieving people they're kind of in a tough spot because their needs are so great and we're such bad communicators. Like we're not like what you're describing is a great idea, but I can also imagine like, wow, that is a lot of work
for
me to mentally try and put together, like clearly all is like, this really hurts. I can't stand this. And the reason why I think boundaries are important, and we can talk about this more in a second, but the reason why I think boundaries are important is because I think when you lose a child or you lose anyone, you lose a lot of friends too, because you don't know how to communicate those boundaries or your friends don't respect your boundaries. And we'll talk about that. But for now, let's just on this side of the story, you don't know how to communicate your boundaries. And it's easier to just disappear than to try and like lay out this clear guidelines for them. It's easier to just stop calling. It's easier to just not answer the texts anymore. It's easier. You're so tired and it's so complicated and it hurts so much. And you're just like, well, I just can't handle it. And she's not getting it. Like, that's what also, like, you'll say something like, I don't know, like, whatever you'll say. Let's say, like, babies hurt my feelings or whatever it is.
Right.
You see babies, whatever it is, something vague, and they won't understand it. And you're like, well, I tried.
Exactly.
I just can't talk to her anymore. I need to step back. And then what happens is 2 years later, you come back to your life and it's just a burnt to a crisp everywhere. Like barely any buildings are standing. Any relationships have survived. And I'm not blaming the person grieving. I don't think that's the case at all. I think our society needs to be more thoughtful and considerate. But I do also think that we don't help ourselves because we're helpless. And like, I think if I would have communicated boundaries with certain relationships, maybe they would still be there. And instead I've kind of lost those friendships. And at this point, it's hard to rebuild.
Absolutely.
So I think this is something to think about also with family members. But this is another thing, like family members like don't know how to show up for you. They don't understand your boundaries. And we're not very good at communicating and everything hurts. So it's hard to identify. And so we end up like losing family members because we're not able to communicate boundaries. And then 2 years later, when you're ready to have that relationship, it's damaged. It's too damaged to fix. So, okay. So you've identified that you want to make a boundary and then you need to find a way to be clear.
Right.
And articulate.
And like in your example, it was too much of your own effort, too much work, too much energy to do the work for that person.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting it and maybe they're not able to see how thoughtful they could be. They're missing their own opportunity to be more thoughtful, which is why up front, if you set that boundary once and you set that boundary very clearly, then that saves you exhaustion later on. But it's more work for you personally up front. So a couple ways to mitigate that and, set a boundary without having to do as much work. You have two options. One, you can set like an immediate temporary boundary, which sounds like, hey, I can't answer you right now or talk about this right now. I'll get back to you. And that way you can you're responding to your friend instead of ghosting, letting them know, like, I see you, I acknowledge you. And also, I am not able to engage with this right now. And that lets your friend know, like, oh, something's up and they'll get back to me later. So it's just it's like a little Band-Aid, a little boundary Band-Aid. Let's call it that. Where you're just saying, like, I can't deal with you or deal with this right now, but I will try to respond to you at a later time when I can deal with you. Especially if it's like you're getting a baby information and you've lost your child and it's extra triggering in that moment, or if you're surprised with it out of nowhere because that person didn't think about getting your consent first to send you a baby picture or a baby update. So you could say, put that boundary Band-Aid on, and then when your emotions have regulated a little bit, you can come back to it and try to set a more complicated boundary. The second thing that you can do is designate what I call a boundary ambassador. This is a thing I have actually done with some of my clients who have ADHD, where they get really overwhelmed with information and get very, very overwhelmed with people asking them questions. So I had a client who was going through a divorce and everybody in their life wanted details. And this client was like, back up off me. I can't even hear what you're saying to me, let alone answer your questions. Like, just so much overwhelm. And so they had their sibling become their boundary ambassador. So their sibling was the one to talk to the friends, talk to the family, talk to their shared parents and say, here's what you're allowed to ask. Here's what you're not allowed to ask. If you have questions, ask me first. And so the boundary ambassador who had a little bit more energy, was able to set those boundaries and share that information. Now, this is a completely different circumstance, right? Because someone who is your...
Yes and no, but I mean, yes, it is. But also there are people like parents, or siblings, or sometimes there's not a spouse, but sometimes there is.
Right.
You can imagine with one spouse, one friend would be triggering, but another instance wouldn't. So, that friend could maybe reach out to your husband first to ask, because it's not triggering for your husband to see pictures of babies. It's triggering for your husband or partner to go back to the office. So
right.
That's not your trigger. So I can see it kind of, just because different people have different triggers. And so it's possible that maybe that person could be a boundary ambassador. I think that's a creative solution.
Yeah. And it can be tricky, especially if there's a loss in the family, because if everyone is grieving, it might be more difficult to find a person who has the energy to be the boundary ambassador. So I acknowledge that. And each person's circumstances are obviously going to be different. So if you have a friend or a family member who does have that energy, a lot of times we get asked when we're in a difficult situation or when we're grieving, hey, let me know what I can do to help.
Right.
Well, what you can do to help me is communicate boundaries with everyone else. And one of the boundaries is never ask me that unhelpful question.
I think that's a really good idea.
So there's one way that you can manage boundaries.
Once you have, you've articulated your boundaries, I think this is what people's next questions are going to be. What happens when the person violates the boundary?
I love this question. Yes, they will. Especially if they don't understand boundaries and the importance of boundaries. And so it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If a person violates your boundaries, you cannot control them. And you have to decide, do you have the energy to remind them of the boundary and give them another chance? Or do you need to set up some kind of natural consequence or specific consequence that you are intentionally giving them? And it's case by case, it's person by person. Like, somebody's parents will probably have different boundaries and maybe different consequences than somebody's friends. Mm-hmm. Or certain friends, like best friends who really get us, maybe we have far fewer boundaries or less strict boundaries with our best friends than we do with our casual acquaintances, who might need firmer boundaries if they don't really know us as well. So it is tricky, and it is especially tricky when you're dealing with grief and other people who are grieving, because of course you want to protect everybody's feelings. And so again, going back to give yourself permission not to feel guilty. Give yourself permission to handle your own emotions first. It's like that analogy of you have to put your own mask on before you can help others put their mask on. If the mask drops when you're on an airplane, you can't effectively manage or support the feelings of others until you have managed your own feelings, especially if the loss is being felt extra deeply by yourself. Which, of course, if you lose a child, your friends and family and your parents are going to feel for you. And also, you're going to be feeling that loss and that grief the deepest.
Yeah.
So put your own mask on first and trust yourself to communicate a boundary clearly, effectively, and without fear. And then, if it's broken, you have to decide what you are able to do.
Like, the way I think about it is, like, the boundaries are the rules of the game. but you're also the referee. So if you break
Yes.
the rules, you get to decide. Like, you get to decide. If you're the type of person, and this is the type of relationship where it's like, okay, one and done, they broke it once. This is such a big rule in my life. Like, if you violated the rule, then I can never trust you. Then you get to decide that that person lost the game and you can't be there in this relationship with them. But there are other people who you can like see their effort and see that they're trying, but they don't get it, or they can't relate, or they made a mistake. And, you can give them more flexibilities, or you can work together on adjusting that boundary. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, just talking about pictures, when my nephew was born, I told my sister, I don't want to see any pictures of the baby. So for a year, I did not see any pictures of the baby. She sent all the pictures to a separate family group chat. Well, at some point, I don't know why, but like, a picture was sent. And it wasn't sent by her. It was like sent by someone else of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I didn't respond. I didn't enforce the boundary. And I was at a spot in my healing where it didn't trigger me as much. It was like my response was not like a 10 on the scale of like stress. It was maybe like a 6. And I managed it enough. And so then like a week later, someone else did. And I didn't enforce that boundary. And so it kind of just like slowly trickled, and the rules no longer were serving me, or I was able to cope with them enough that I didn't need that boundary. Like, the boundary changed.
Yeah.
I pulled it to a different direction. And just because they broke it that one time, it felt like maybe there was a little test. It had been a year, and I dipped my toe in the water and I was okay. And so the boundary changed.
Yeah. And that's a perfect example of how boundaries are going to evolve over time, and when you're allowed to change your mind. If you were in a place where you were not ready to flex that boundary or to allow it to evolve and change, let's say it was much earlier in time, a good way to hold that boundary if it had been violated would be, hey, I'm going to block your number for a month because you're not respecting my boundary of not sharing baby pictures, and I really cannot handle it. I'm going to unblock you or not. Like, if it's too scary to completely cut a person out, or that fear of losing a friend forever because it makes us uncomfortable to make them uncomfortable, you can always adjust the consequence of a boundary break.
More like, okay, so fine, friends is one thing, but like, what about in-laws, parents? Like,
right.
I mean, that happens.
It does.
They like insert themselves, or they put their needs first, or they whatever. You can't. It's not easy to cut them out.
It's not.
And if you did, like, like, let's say they do something and they violate your boundary, and you like push back and say like, hey, like, maybe you escalate it a little bit, but then like sometimes people like escalate it 10 steps, like they lose their fucking mind. And they start screaming, like, and then what? Then what are you supposed to do? Now you're dealing with your mom and your baby. Like, it's like the situation becomes more big and more dramatic. And what started as you enforcing your boundary, it's like World War III.
Yes.
And then what? Then you're in a mess.
That happens. That especially happens with people who, when they are given a boundary, it triggers their own rejection or their own insecurities, their own fear of being limited. So they might push back against that boundary even harder. It might turn into World War III because they can't handle or regulate their own emotions. And it comes back to giving yourself permission to not feel guilty, because you're not responsible for their feelings, especially when you have to take care of yourself first. And it can be really hard, especially with people in our lives that we can't cut out or have difficulty cutting out. And when we're grieving, we're often relying on so many, like any string we can grasp at to pull us out of like the drowning situation that we're in.
Right.
Like any port in a storm, even if that port is mean to us or disrespecting our boundaries. So it's okay to be flexible. It's okay to experiment. You might have to try setting boundaries, especially with difficult people, and see what works and see what doesn't. And know that your boundary can be temporary. You can always put that Band-Aid boundary on, especially for people who do not get it or don't want to get it. And you can't necessarily block their phone number. So you could say, hey, I'm not going to respond to your text for the rest of the day. Like if it's your mom or your sibling or a best friend. And that's because I set this boundary. You're not listening to me. So I'm just not going to respond to you for today. And then tomorrow's a new day. We can try again. It's more work for you. It's more exhausting than them just respecting your boundary. However, we can't control what other people do. And so, yeah, we're going to encounter times when another person just is not getting it or refuses to get it because of their own emotional turmoil or whatever's going on with them. And that's not your job to figure out. And that's not your job to coach them through it. And that's not your job to teach them. Your job is to protect yourself. And so you could be in a situation where every day you have to remind them, this is my boundary. And if you break it, I'm just not going to respond to you for the rest of the day. Or if you bring this up with me in conversation, I refuse to continue the conversation. Because it goes both ways. That person cannot control you either.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree with it. And I also can imagine for myself, like that being hard. I just think it's hard because I don't think I'm a people pleaser, but I do think it's hard to hurt people's feelings.
Yes, it is hard. It's a practice in general with like any kind of healthy communication. It's a thing that I work with my clients about, is just kind of slowly, step by step over time, building up emotional resilience and learning how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and setting healthy boundaries and teaching others about boundaries. And so it's going to be hard, and it's okay that it's hard. And if it's too hard, that's where your boundary ambassador can be really helpful for you, of like, hey, mom, you are making it really difficult for Susie to function. So you need to like stop texting her for today.
Yeah.
Or, that's just an example.
Boundaries, I think of like cutting people out. When I think of boundaries, it always seems like very blunt. It seems like very like hard line.
Okay.
I feel like what you're describing is like softer boundaries,
Yeah.
These are like, to me, like soft, these are gentle boundaries.
Yes.
And I also feel like I can also imagine myself listening to this and being like, it's just easier to walk away.
And maybe it is. We don't want to discount that, because when you're overwhelmed with emotions that are really difficult, like grief and depression, loss, despair, maybe you don't have the energy to set a boundary, and that's okay. Maybe you don't have the energy to designate a boundary ambassador and explain to them how to explain to everybody else to respect your boundaries and your needs. Maybe all you can do is ignore everybody. That's okay, because that's still putting your mask on first.
Yeah.
And knowing that, okay, when I'm in a place where I can communicate, you can always retroactively explain your boundary. Like, hey, you haven't heard from me in a month because I couldn't function. Going forward, you can help me function by not mentioning babies. And hopefully the people in your life will hear that, they'll respect that. And not everybody will. And that is how we lose friends along the way when we're dealing with a mental health crisis. And either they have too much going on in their lives to help us and support us, or maybe they don't have enough emotional intelligence to understand what's really happening and they take things personally, whatever reason. It's part of how we move through life, and we are allowed to feel sad about it, and we're allowed to acknowledge it, and we're allowed to say, that really sucks.
Yeah.
And we're allowed to let go of anyone who has hurt us or who hasn't served us or who haven't followed our boundaries.
What happens if we don't set these boundaries? Like,
love this. This is such a great question. I feel like
you're making me feel so good. You're like, these are great.
They are, Judith. They are great questions. What happens when we don't set boundaries? We aren't protected. We aren't protecting ourselves. We aren't enforcing any kind of regulation. And so that is going to increase our anxiety first and foremost, because we don't know what to expect. Others don't know what we want. And so we just never know what's going to happen. And we haven't voiced what we expect to happen or what we need to happen. So it's like anxiety increases. We're doing more emotional labor if we don't set boundaries, because we are just taking in what everyone else is giving us and doing more emotional labor to hold it or to respond to it or to manage it. And it can be as simple as, if I'm going through grief and I'm also an introvert, and it's already hard for me to socialize, but dealing with grief on top of that makes it impossible for me to socialize. If I don't set a boundary about socializing, and my friends keep inviting me to do stuff, and then they're getting mad at me because I'm just declining invitations, and then I slowly lose those friends. So then I feel rejected. I feel unsupported. I have anxiety. I'm worried about ever saying no again. I'm going to become more stressed and become more depressed. And I might even have resentment towards people. But I can't ever expect someone to support me and respect my boundaries if I haven't expressed what I need from them. So if you don't set a boundary, things are going to be more chaotic in a way that we really don't love. Boundaries are there to protect us and not to punish others. So anyone who sees a boundary as a punishment, they are not understanding what a boundary is. And maybe their emotional intelligence is a little bit lower. They just need a little education. Maybe they're feeling personally offended that you've set a boundary. That's for them to figure out. That's not your job to coach them through that. So anyway, boundaries are important because they save us time. They save us energy. They save us emotional stress. They save us. They save us.
I can think of another example of a boundary. Actually, when I look back on those first days of loss, pretty much the only person I set boundaries with is my sister. And everyone else I did not. And I think when you look at the friends I've kept along the way, if they were friends that in any way had hurt me, I lost them entirely. The ones that didn't hurt me, they're still in my life. But the friends that hurt, I haven't recovered with pretty much any friend that hurt me during those initial 2 years, except my sister, because I set those boundaries. Everything else, they're just gone for now. And I can think about I remember when I went to my brother's wedding, and all this also remember that staying at my sister's house was just so painful and so triggering. And it was just so difficult for me. I made a boundary that I would not stay at her house. My husband and I left and went and stayed in a hotel instead. And and when we came back in future times, we just never stayed at her house. And that was a boundary. And what I feel like once I made that decision, I felt so much safer, because I felt like once I communicated that to her, I felt like she wasn't going to push me. And then I wasn't going to be in this horrible position where she would invite me to come and I would feel like this dread. And then I would be resentful that she made me do something I didn't want to do. It was like she didn't know that there would be something that would be hard for me to stay until I told her. And then if she would push it, if I didn't tell her, she would be pushing and didn't even know she was pushing a boundary. And it would be so hard for me. And then I would feel so anxious leading up to it. And then when I was there, it would be horrible. And then afterward, I was resentful that it happened. So I feel like even though it feels at the time like you're pushing the person away, what you're really doing is I feel like putting it on ice. You're putting that relationship on ice to come back to it later when you're ready for it, and reopen that door. And if you don't put the boundary up, you're just going to be resentful that they didn't follow the rules that they didn't even know they had.
Yes.
Or they broke the rules. If you don't put it up, you're going to lose it. Here's the reality. If you don't put up boundaries and your friends are hurting you, you're going to lose that relationship, because either you're going to be so resentful and so hurt by what they did, or you're just going to walk away because it's too hard to communicate with them. But you're going to lose that relationship.
Yes.
So any relationship that you want to preserve, you have to put up boundaries.
Yes.
That's pretty much the way it works.
That's perfectly worded. And
yeah.
That piece of well, I'm scared that I'm going to upset that friend if I set this boundary. That's okay. They're allowed to be upset. You're allowed to be upset. You're not going to
have the friend in 2 years. Let's be honest.
Right.
This is just the reality. Jen's not saying it because she probably doesn't want to make a blanket statement, but I
don't.
Alina's situation was slightly different. She had some friends that did that did not, follow her boundaries, but she's not close with them. They're still in her life, but she's not close with them. And she doesn't feel safe with them.
Right.
And she doesn't trust them. And she knows every time this person comes, she's going to say something like, my kid has a 99-degree fever. I'm scared he's going to die. And Alina, it hurts her feelings every time the person says that.
No shit.
Yeah, it's not great. But she just doesn't see that person very often. And when she does, she expects them to hurt her. So she doesn't feel like she can trust them. So the relationship is damaged. So if you want to preserve your relationships, the only reason I can talk about my sister in these examples is because, like I said, that's the only relationship I really preserved that was hard for me. All the other relationships that I still have in my life were not challenging. They were the ones that were healing and helpful and supportive to me. The ones that were challenging, that I did not set up boundaries, I do not have. Or if I have them, they're in the most watered down, useless version. So it's really the only choice.
Yeah.
If you care about the relationship.
Right, exactly. And not all relationships are worth setting boundaries with. Maybe it's just an acquaintance. Maybe it's not worth fighting for. That's okay. You don't have to fight for every single person in your life. You don't have to set boundaries with every single person in your life. But boundaries allow us to have healthier relationships. It gives that other person even more opportunity to support, love, and respect you. And when we're in times of crisis, especially like grief, boundaries can offer a person who wants to support you a way to show you, like, hey, I'm here for you. And if the only thing I can do for you is leave you alone, I'm going to respect that boundary. And you let me know, like, if someone sets a boundary with you, like, hey, leave me alone for the next month, a great way to respect that boundary is to say, great, no problem. Is it okay if I check in with you 4 weeks from now?
Here's another thing that I'm asking. Is it possible to frame the boundary conversation in a positives of like, not don't do this, but
yes,
do this instead?
Yes. Anyone who's been through therapy or read about therapy or self-help or communication knows I statements.
Yeah.
So instead of, you are not allowed to share baby pictures with me, you can just flip that with, I, right now, am not opening or reading or receiving any text with a baby picture. So I am limiting what I'm exposed to. And I would love for you to support me by not sending me any baby pictures, or which that still phrases a negative a little bit, but you can always make it about yourself. I've decided that I will not be receiving baby texts, or I've decided I will only receive happy texts or funny jokes or memes, or
you could say like, I've decided that I'm choosing to spend time with my friends in going to bars instead of going to their houses because I know there'll be babies there. So I'm choosing to go to bars. So
exactly,
be to a bar,
or like,
I'm not going to your house, but I'm doing this.
Yes, that's a great one.
Which is so much work. I mean, I just want to say this is a lot of work.
It is.
It's easy to say in this thing, but it's important conversation to have for when you're ready to do that work.
And we have to remember when we're communicating with people, if we truly want to set them up for success to understand what we're saying, we have to meet them where they are. And so a person who is not grieving or not grieving as much as us cannot in a million years understand where we're coming from.
Right.
And yeah, it is more work. And everything is more difficult. If the friendship is important to you, though, you can even use that little boundary band-aid of, hey, for now, and it can always be for now, right now, for now, today, this week, this month. It doesn't have to be forever. For now, I am only going out. If you want to hang with me, let's go see a movie. Let's go to the bar. Let's walk around the mall. That's what I'm doing right now. And then it's like, if they want clarification, like, oh, well, why don't you just want to come over? You don't even have to explain. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Like, oh, well, I just don't want to hang out in houses right now. Or I don't want to talk about why. If you want to see me, we're going to go see a movie.
Someone said to me once, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells when I talk to you because I don't know, I feel like I can't say anything. And I feel like I'd be like, yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Right. It's like,
I get it. I know I get it. You're right.
you can't say anything.
Right.
And really that's
where I am right now.
That's kind of a healthy boundary that each person in the world could choose to hold. It's like, you can't just say anything to me or I'm going to get pissed. Like there are certain things that for me personally, like people know not to say to me because then like the claws are going to come out and the fire ignites behind me. But, common courtesy is a boundary and we just kind of don't realize it.
Well, I think this has been a really good conversation, and I'm really sad that Alina's not here because she would love it. But don't worry, she's going to listen.
Good.
Is there anything else before we wrap up?
Yes.
Okay.
What
would you like to say?
I have a list of examples that people experiencing grief could consider. So some very basic ones like grief, how you need to give yourself permission to experience what you need to experience, take breaks as needed, say no without explanation or apology. This is a big one. You can say no. You don't have to apologize and you don't have to explain why. Just no. Can I send you a picture of my baby? No. Do you want to come over to my house? No. Can we get together with the family this weekend? No. No. You don't have to explain. You can set limits for what you say about your grief. You can set limits for how much you're going to share. You can set limits with, in regard to who you share things with. You can set limits about at work with your coworkers, how much you share, whether you're going to work on certain anniversaries, which is one of the episodes I listened to before I gave you my list of ideas of what we could talk about. You can set up physical boundaries too. Like you don't have to allow yourself to be hugged by every single person who wants to support you, especially ADHD and autism. People often have sensory issues with being hugged or touched or squeezed. And in addition to grief, like there are times in our lives where we just don't want to be touched. And maybe when you're grieving, like that's too overwhelming, or you feel like you're having to do emotional labor to allow someone to touch you, or maybe you just don't like that person. Maybe it's like mean Aunt Mabel and you don't like her and here she is coming in for like a squeeze. You're allowed to say no. So physical boundaries are great when you're grieving. You can set up boundaries about space or items related to the loss. So if you've lost a baby, you can set a boundary of like, don't go into that room until I say so. Like no one's going to touch this stuff. Or if someone comes over to help you clean, you're allowed to say this is off limits. Like don't touch this teddy bear, don't touch this room, or don't touch that rug. Those are just some good examples. Give yourself permission to prioritize your own self-care. Give yourself permission to take things off your plate that you just don't have the energy for.
Those were good examples.
Thanks.
Sound like you prepared.
What? No, I did nothing. This is just, listen.
Is there anything else that you want to say that you prepared? Jen prepared and she was...
Listen.
It was so cute. So is there anything else that you prepared? I want to make sure you get a chance to say everything you prepared.
No, I have 12 pages of notes.
For this?
Yes.
Did you use any of them?
Oh, I used a lot. Listen, for those who don't know me, which is everyone listening except Judith, I was a librarian in my previous career. So using reliable resources, backing up statements with facts, and being completely prepared to share information is deeply ingrained in me. So
I think that's very funny. I love it. I think it's great. Like a nice 12-page document about boundaries that you can use anytime you need.
Exactly. I'm going to write a blog post. I can do a whole course.
Yes, you could. And I think that was really helpful. And people can find you. Okay, so let's say it again because I don't want to fuck this up. Jen.Ventling.
Yes.
Jen.Ventling@gmail.com.
That's it.
And Jen the Chaotic.
Yes.
We'll tag everything. We'll tag this.
Yeah.
But Jen, you work with a family member of mine. I'm not going to say who. Someone in my family. Actually, multiple people. Jen works with people in my life. And
I can neither confirm nor deny this.
So Jen isn't allowed to say anything, but as you guys know, my sister's a pediatrician. So she recommended her the other day. And Jen, you're accepting new clients, people who want to work with you
Yes.
can find you. I can say that from firsthand experience, she has transformed these people's lives in my world and now my sister's patient's world as well. So if you need Jen services, you can reach out to her and
Yes.
know that she'd be happy to help you.
I would be so happy. You can email, you can find my number on my website, you can text me. I'm not going to.
Your website also, Jen the Chaotic.
Yes, it is. JenTheChaotic.com, where you can get this cute tank top.
A cute tank top that says chaotic. And a cute tank top that says bad vibes also.
Yes.
Which I love.
Made it just for you.
To all of our wonderful new friends, we want to hear from you. Email us at aslongasimlivingpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at aslongasimlivingpodcast. We'll get back to you as soon as our grieving brains allow.
Yay!